There are two main purposes. First, limit the quantity of imports. So it's trying to reduce the quantity of imports. And the second is trying to protect the domestic economy from foreign competition. So when you open up the country and basically you start trading with other countries, the biggest threat is that, its threat and opportunity is that the new foreign competitions come into the market. For example, hypothetically, in Korea there is like Hyundai and Kia car, right? But after opening up the car trade market, like other like car companies like Benz, BMW, all these kind of things come into Korea. So those are foreign competition. And then the main focus of trade protection is trying to protect the domestic industries or domestic economy. So the reasons of trade protection, so why protect their country, is because first, as I said, protect the domestic industries. So as I said, if you open up the country, there's a risk that other foreign competitions, foreign like industries or firms enter the domestic market and dominate the market. You don't want that to happen. So you try to, with trade protection, you try to protect the domestic industries. How does it work is you reduce the imports. So because I said the purpose of trade protection is limiting the quantity of imports and protecting the domestic industry, you reduce the quantity of imports, so there are less imports, more domestically produced goods. So for example, again cars, for example, initially we were producing like, initially we were importing like 1,000 cars, but you set a trade protection, so by the end you import only 100 units of cars. Then other 900 units can be either like domestically produced by domestic firms. Then you're protecting domestic industry and domestic employees and all those kind of things. Does everyone understand this part?
Yes.
Okay. So the second type of the second reason why they don't want to do trade protection is secondly the government revenue. But this one is only applicable in tariff. So tariff is basically the government collects like tariff revenue from it. It's similar with tax, but they collect the tariff revenue from by imposing tariff. Then the government can use the tariff revenue for their own use. So they can put it in their budget and then they can use it by their own will. In other like areas such as like national defense or like research and development, all those kind of things. And last but not least is overcome trade deficit. So trade deficit means basically your imports are greater than your exports. So basically it's called 무역 적자 in Korean, I think. So if you lower the imports, so basically the M reduces, the value of M reduces, then the X minus M increases, the net export increases, so it may lead to just trade surplus or reduce the trade deficit or even lead to trade surplus. Okay, does everyone understand until here?
Yes.
Except for this two. Does anyone have question until this point? Okay, sadly I cannot see your screen, so can you please answer? Everyone understand this until this point, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I cannot see your screen, so sadly if you do this or whatever sign, I cannot see it, so you need to speak up if I ask you a question for today. Okay, so there are basically four types of trade protection, like four major types of trade protection. And the first one will be the tariff, second will be the quota, third will be subsidy, and fourth will be the administrative barriers. So before I mean even before trade or even and world. So before trade, which means country did not open their trading routes and everything to other countries. So it's only their own economy. And then what happens if there's a world trade? So today we're going to see the market of Apple in Korea. So this diagram will be particularly for before trade. So there's only domestic demand and supply. So as you see, the axis is the x-axis will be the quantity of apple, y-axis will be the price of apples. And then in non-trading economy, so for example, if Korea is not trading with any other countries, there is the domestic demand, so domestic demand of apples and the domestic supply of apples. So equilibrium will occur when domestic supply of apple equals to domestic demand of apple. So here, this point. At this point, the equilibrium price will be P, price of apple equilibrium, and then equilibrium quantity will be quantity of apple equilibrium. So this two spots, spots. However, if Korea decides to trade with other countries, and then other countries start selling apple in Korea, after trade, the world price and world supply comes in. So this one is world supply, and this particular price will be the world price. And then world price is usually lower than domestic price, because, for example, like those countries that are in warm countries, or those countries who are specialized in producing in apples, they can produce apples with much cheaper cost, so they can set a much lower price than Korea. So the price of the world price will be lower than the price of apple. Because basically, if you want to import, you're gonna import from countries that has goods that have lower prices, not higher prices than us. So at price world, if you see this line, the quantity of apple demanded will be where the supply world intersects the demand world. So this point. So quantity demanded will be Q1, and then the supply world, the quantity of apple supplied, however, will be where the supply of world equals to supply of domestic. So this point. So the quantity supplied will be the quantity that's domestically supplied will be Q2. Then, since the quantity demanded Q1 is greater than quantity supplied, so domestically quantity demanded is greater than domestic quantity supplied. So since Q1 is greater than Q2, there's a shortage of apples. From Korea point of view, from domestic point of view, then the Korea will import apples for quantity of Q1 minus Q2. So this one is domestically produced. This will be imported from other countries. Does everyone understand this point?
Yes.
Pardon?
Good.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Quantity, we have to import.
Yes. So, yes. So basically, since domestic demand is greater than domestic supply, you need to import those things. Very good. So for those who didn't listen to previous lectures, shortage means excess demand in economic terms. So basically, if the price is lower, the demand is greater. So demand is greater than domestic supply. So the amount that you don't have, you need to import from other countries. Oh, yes. So shortage, importing quantity. So now we need to talk about the various trade protections and how it affects the imported quantity. So, tariff by definition is tax imposed on imported goods. So, usually tariff will be tariff per unit. So, the government imposes tariff per unit, and then, for example, there's 1,000 won of tariff per unit of apple, and then the world price of apple is 1,000 won. The actual price of apple that the domestic consumers need to pay will be 1,000 plus 1,000 equals 2,000 won. So effect is world supply decreases, shown as this one should be horizontal upshift of supply curve, world supply curve. So SW to SWT. So it decreases from here to here. So, for example, if we apply this, the price of world will be 1,000 won, and then tariff per unit will be 1,000 won too. Then the final price will be 2,000 won. So if you see, before tariff, so in the free trade, so no government intervention at all, the initial quantity demanded will be Q2. So here, this one is same with this slide. And then the initial quantity supplied is Q1. So the initially imported quantity is the shortage, which is Q2 minus Q1. However, after tariff, so at this price, the new quantity demanded will be this point. So where the world supply plus tariff equals to the domestic demand. So the quantity demanded will be Q4, new quantity demanded, which is domestically demanded. And then the new quantity that's supplied domestically will be the supply, where supply domestic equals to supply of the W plus tariff, which is this point. So the new quantity that is domestically supplied is Q3. So the new shortage will be Q4 minus Q3. Since the Q2 minus Q1 is greater than Q4 minus Q3, the imported quantity has decreased. So does everyone understand to this point?
Yes.
So,
Reduce the quantity after tariff.
Yes. So actually this arrow shows you. So before tariff, you import this amount. After tariff, you import this amount. So we can see that it's clearly shown in the diagram that the quantity that you import, the quantity of apple that you import reduces. So it basically achieves what trade protection wants to do. Alright, and then at this point, I said that another purpose, two purposes of trade protection. One is to protect the domestic industry. Second is reduce the quantity of imports. This one not only reduces the quantity of imports, but the domestic producers will initially produce Q1, but it increased to Q3. So we can see that domestic producers can produce more, and then the government eventually protected the domestic apple industry. The distinct feature of tariff is that the government receives revenue from it. So from the exporting country's view, so the country that exports apple to Korea, from that point of view. So before tariff, the quantity they sell equals the shortage of importing country. So shortage of Korea, of apple, which is Q2 minus Q1. And then the price that they receive is P-roll. So you receive this price, and then you sell this amount of quantity. Then the revenue will be the yellow box, since the revenue is price times quantity. However, after tariff, quantity they sell changes to the shortage of imported country, but it reduced from this much to this much. It reduced. And then the price they receive is P-roll, not PW plus T. The reason why is because tariff per unit is received by the government, not the exporting companies or country. So price that the exporting country actually receive will be the price they sell, which is this, minus the tariff per unit. So they're basically selling at P rolled, the P rolled, not PW plus T. So the revenue of exporting country will be the orange box because they sell this much and price they receive is this much. And then the government revenue, in this case Korean government's revenue, will be the blue box, which is tariff per unit times the quantity that the exporting countries sell. Does everyone get this point?
Yes.
Oh God. Okay, I will believe that everyone gets this point because no one's answering. Okay, so basically, from exporting countries' point of view, their revenue have decreased. The second type of trade protection will be quota. So quota is a restriction on quantity of imports. So this one, tariff, is basically you hit a tax and you impose a tax and you wish that the quantity of import reduces. This one is directly reducing the quantity of imports to a certain amount. So government restricts the quantity of imports. So for example, import only 100 boxes of apple. It is shown as supply domestic, shifts to the right to supply quota. And then the horizontal distance between the supply domestic and supply quota will be the actual quota amount. So this will be like 100 boxes if you apply this. So before quota, it will be the same. The initial quantity demanded is Q2. The quantity domestically supplied is Q1. So the imported quantity will be the Q2 minus Q1. However, if there's a quota, so after restricting the import from the first place, so the new quantity demanded at this P quota, the price quota price, the new quantity demanded will be Q4 at this price level. And then the new quantity domestically supplied at this price level will be here, the Q3. So the new shortage will be Q4 minus Q3. So since the import, when they're free trade, so Q2 minus Q1 is greater than Q4 minus Q3, the imported quantity has decreased. Does everyone understand this point? Quota is more difficult to understand because I believe there are not much quota examples in real life. I mean there are, but we're not familiar with it. So basically this also has the effect of reducing the quantity of imports. So distinct difference with tariff is no government revenue. Oh, did someone say something?
Oh, yes. I have a question.
Yes.
If the quota is the increase quota quantity, when quota quantity increase.
Yes.
And then how move the supply with the right?
Oh, so for example, you assume, so if the quota quantity increase, the government decides to increase the quota quantity, then the supply curve will shift even to the right. Yes, it will shift even to the right. Yes, wait. 100 units, if you increase by 150 units, it will increase to the right. If the quota decreases, it will shift to the left. Yes? Okay, so because if you see, if you increase the quota quantity, the price becomes lower, so the imported amount will be greater. However, if you reduce the quota quantity, the price gets higher, then the imported quantity becomes lesser. So yes, so if you quota quantity increase, the supply quota will shift right, decrease it will shift left.
Okay, so
Yes, so.
okay, let me give you example. Okay, let me give you examples regarding the quota. Actually, it's, when it comes to FDA with USA and with Chile, so in order to protect domestic agricultural area, especially for the rice field, rice industry, the governments of Korea just set the quota. So they just allow the importers to import the rice from overseas, from USA, and grapes from Chile gradually, to protect the domestic industry, as agricultural industry. So they can sustain, they can keep the price of domestic products. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Kim Yong-sun gave us a good example. Okay, so distinct difference with tariff is that there's no government revenue. So there's no government tariff revenue. So from exporting countries' point of view, before quota, price is the same with tariff. The price they receive will PW, the quantity they sell is the shortage of importing country, Q2 minus Q1. So the revenue they sell is basically the yellow box. This one is same as tariff. But after quota, what happens is that the quantity they sell reduces to Q4 minus Q3. This one is the same with the previous slide. However, the price they receive is PQ, not the P one. Because since there's no tax, no tariff, price they actually receive will remain PQ. So the revenue of exporting country will be orange box. It depends on the elasticity, but however, usually if this happens, the revenue of exporting countries decrease in most cases. So the last but most most troublesome method is the subsidy. So this one is the government subsidizing the domestic industry. So payment is payment by the government to the firms to lower the cost of production and price, and then so government grants subsidy per unit to the domestic firms. So for example, this one is quite important. So if the government decides to subsidize 1,000 won per unit on apple to the agricultural farms, the P roll will be 1,000 won. Then the price of apple that domestic apple producers receive is the world price plus the subsidy per unit. So it will be 2,000 won. However, the price that domestic producers will pay is still the world price, 1,000 won. So even though domestic producers receive 2,000 won, this particular 1,000 won is paid by the government, not by the consumers. So consumers still pay the same amount, 1,000 won. However, the producers receive 2,000 won. Does everyone understand this point? So this one is quite. I mean, if you hear in the first place, if you hear it first time, it's odd, but you need to understand this point. So the effect of subsidy is the domestic supply increases, because those who attended my subsidy lecture, and I believe 2 months ago, the subsidy has an effect of increasing its the supply. So it shifts to the right, supply shifts to the right. So shift of SS domestic to the right to SS domestic to SS subsidy. So you shift to the right, and in this part, the vertical distance between the two supply curve will be the subsidy per unit. So before subsidy, the initial quantity demanded will be Q2, the quantity domestic supply is Q1, so the imported quantity will be Q2 minus Q1. However, after subsidy, after the supply curve increases, the new quantity demanded is still Q2 because since the consumers pay the same price, the quantity demanded does not decrease. However, the new quantity supplied will be Q3, where the new supply curve, the supply after subsidy curve, equals to the world supply. So this quantity, Q3 quantity, will be produced by domestic producers. Then the new shortage will be Q2 minus Q3. So this quantity, since Q2 minus Q1 is greater than Q2 minus Q3, the imported quantity has decreased. And then the important part is that since government pays subsidy, this particular amount, so this box, is paid by the government to subsidize the domestic producers of apple. So the box, which is terribly drawn, will be the government's expenditure on to subsidize the good. Does everyone understand this part?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Last major trade protection is called the administrative barriers. And then this is a variety of obstacles to imports imposed by the governments as a form of trade protection intended to limit the quantity of imports and protect the domestic producers from foreign competition. So important thing is that there's no taxes or there's no direct quantity limit, but this one is more hidden, this one is less obvious. For example, like complicated bureaucratic procedures. So like a lot of like those kind of paperworks and a lot of steps which will cost you. And then second will be variety of unnecessary packaging, health, safety, and environmental standards. So actually, US has very high health and environmental standards of every product that they import. So this one is trying to, for example, those economically less developed countries like 개발도상국, they produce, even though they produce the same good, not all of them, but some of them will have, what should I say, like, not inferior goods, but they are goods produced, but they produce in mass quantity, so their quality is not that standardized. Then those kind of goods cannot be imported because they have the EMDCs, the economically more developed countries, the 선진국, has those kind of standards. Since the 개도국's, the goods standard does not meet the standard of the 선진국 standard, they cannot sell their goods. So they try to protect their own, so the EMDCs try to protect their own industry and producers. So this one is usually known as the hidden protection. So this one is more like to reduce the quantity of imports from the ELDCs, the economically less developed countries. So effect of trade protection. So this one, I try to distinguish them between the stakeholders. Stakeholders meaning those who can be affected by the policies, those people or group that can be affected by each policies. So I believe there are mainly four stakeholders for each policies, which are consumers, foreign exporters, domestic producers, and government. So for tariff, the consumers will lose because they pay higher prices. Foreign exporters, for all cases, they will lose because they export less quantity and then they earn less revenue in all cases. For domestic producers, in all cases, they gain because they produce more and then they have greater revenue. However, so foreign exporters and domestic producers, same effect for all three policies. However, consumers for tariff and quota they lose because they pay higher prices. However, in subsidy, consumers are not affected because they pay the same price. And then for government, for tariff they gain because they earn tariff revenue. For quota they are not affected because they do not receive anything or lose anything. Subsidy they lose because they do expenditure to subsidize the good. And then common consequences, the most common consequence is the risk of retaliation and trade wars. Trade protection can lead to other countries retaliate by imposing their own trade barriers, what China did to USA. So discussion topics, I didn't do it yet, but I know what I need to do. So wait, I'll write. So basically what we are going to do, how many people are there?
7.
No, there's,
No.
oh, there's 6.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8.
여기
네,
맨 마저 두 사람은 아닌 것 같아.
아니요.
이 갤럭시
오케이.
S20, 갤럭시 태블 4는 S4는 원장님 거고 갤럭시 S20 플러스 5G는 누구인지 모르겠네요.
Who is Galaxy S20 plus 5G? Hello? Galaxy Tab S20. Who is it?
Okay, so I just made up the discussion topics. So basically I'll assume that there'll be 6 or 7 people. Then, discussion topic group A will be tariff, one example and advantages and disadvantages of it. Group B will be quota, one example and advantage and disadvantage of it. Group C, subsidy, which is related to trade protection, and one example and advantage and disadvantages. So I think we need to decide who's going to do what. Everyone, pick your choice.
Right.
Everyone, please. Pick your choice, please.
Nakagawa, group C, please.
Okay. Other 4 or 5 people, please. Mr. Wano, is it? Okay. Who's the other guys? Dr. Makoma.
Group B?
Okay, Dr. Makoma, right?
No, Joe.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Pardon?
You can choose a group for me. Any group for me. There's no issue about it.
Okay, then group A. And then Mr. Kim Jong-min will be automatic.
Group A. Sorry, group A.
Mr. Kim Jong-min, you have no choice.
Group B.
Yes. Okay, so this will be a group. So each group, please, if anyone can take a picture or note whose group and then what's the topic. Mr. Kim Myung-sung, would you do the honor to take a picture of this graph? Okay, so you basically just send, Mr. Kim Myung-sung will send you, and then actually for the remaining time, which is like 6 minutes, we're going to hear about the last week's presentation. So group A and B and C, right? So last week group A was about the countries with free floating, fixed and managed, and then group B was advantages of free floating, disadvantage of group, free floating. So I know group B, Mr. Nakawa-san did the advantages, I believe. And then group C was disadvantages. Last week group A, who was it?
Group C.
No, group A I was asking.
Oh.
Oh, Dr. Cho, were you group A?
Anyway, I think the countries with free floating.
Yes, it's exchange rate system.
That's right.
You didn't do it, is it? Group A, did you do your...
Yeah. Group A. I think Group A.
Yes, then did you do your thing?
Yeah, I found the sub-countries.
Okay, very good. So since we have no time, each group will have 2 minutes. And then because from 30, we need to start Kim Choro Wondang님's lecture. So 2 to 3 minutes top. Yes. So group A, you can start anytime. Group A, please stop, please.
Okay. Group B를 넘어.
Okay, now then, so group A, basically I'll say that there are not many, okay. Okay, so basically there are not many countries who do free floating exchange rate system. Most countries adopt either fixed or managed. Most countries. Even Korea is managed. US is managed. So most of the EMDCs are managed. And then most of the ELDCs, so the Kedo, they use fixed. They fixed their currencies to US dollars or Euro or whatever. So Group B, can you start your presentation, please? Group B, can you start, Mr. Nakawa, can you start your presentation? 3 minutes, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Do you see do you see this board?
Yes. We can see it.
Yes. Okay. I began to explain advantages of free floating exchange rate. Free floating exchange rate. Sorry. So I can find four advantages.
Yes.
There are a lot of advantages more, but I choose these four advantages. First, market determines rates. Yes, free floating exchange rates means that the market will determine the rate at which one currency can be changed for another. So, the market will set these rates on a real-time basis. This
Yes, yes.
Yes. Second one, independence. Free floating exchange rates allow the government and central banks to have a independence. So, in other words, in case of fixed exchange rates, central banks and governments the relationship is so close, so not independent. Free floating exchange rate system, government between government and central bank can be independent each other. So it's a second merit. Third merit, less probability of speculative attacks. Free floating currency faces adjustment on real-time basis. So sometimes the currency faces rapid appreciation, whereas others when it faces rapid decline. So sometimes go up rapidly and down rapidly, but as a total, most cases, the currency remains stable.
Yes.
That's first merit. And last merit, low requirement food. You see?
Yes, yes.
Low requirements of return. Exchange system require the central bank to hold so big returns. They don't have to hold so big returns. This is because the central bank doesn't have to conduct active trading operations in order to maintain the value of the currency. So it's the fourth merit, I think. That's all.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, the exact thing that Mr. Nakawa said are the advantages. And then group C will be disadvantages. But since we have no time, Mr. Kim Yong-san, can I summarize?
Okay, so can you activate the shared screen, Mr.
Oh,
Mr. Teacher?
또 아빠 뭐 공유해보죠. 공유할 수 있어요.
이거 호스트가 참가자하면 우리를 비활성화했다 했잖아. 네? 그러자 공유가 비활성화되어 있다.
그래. 누가 공유를 하셨으니까. 됐어. 아빠만 해보세요. 다시. 됐나요?
Okay.
Okay, good.
Got it. So only 1 minute, okay?
오케이 라.
여기.
오소. 아빠만 이게 보입니다. 닫기를 누르시면 뭐 해보시죠. 네.
Yeah, actually, so we had 3 members of C group. However, they couldn't join the class, so on behalf of them, so I will give the explanations about this advantage of free floating exchange rate. Okay, so everybody got it?
Yes.
Can you hear clearly? Okay, all right, good. Okay, so first of all, the prior themes regarding the high, this advantage of free floating exchange rate is high volatility. So it means today you have the any fixed exchange rate. However, tomorrow it will be changed. So it means it can make a big volatility, right? So it can produce any uncertainty in the economy. So it can be a big problem to the stakeholders of each industry. Okay, second one is lack of investments. Because of uncertainty in the exchange rates, so they are very, the investors are very reluctant to invest some money into the country. So they can make also lack of investments. The third one is speculation. Okay, so let me give you some example. So in 1997, in Asian financial crisis, we experienced the speculation. So there are lots of attack from the speculative forces into South Asian country, right, including Korea, South Korea. And so sometimes the volatility,